Good afternoon and welcome to the Oneburg Three Rivers podcast for Monday, May 13th. I am your host, Ed Troop. Glad you could join us on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify as it's another week in sports. And I'm joined by my co-host, Brian Carruthers. Brian, lots to talk about this week. It was an exciting weekend in the Berg, that's for sure, when you're talking sports.
Oh my God, it feels like every week is, right? Like there's always something going on great in Pittsburgh, football is a full year commitment, right? You never can turn off the football button. But then, this past Saturday with Paul Skeens debuting for the Pirates, that got some excitement. The series with the Cubs was pretty exciting. And yeah, here we go. It's another exciting week.
Yeah, talk about Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens makes his debut here in Pittsburgh. You were there on Saturday. The number one pick finally called up. And, boy, it was an exciting atmosphere. Sellout crowd. He pitched 4 strong innings. But then the Pirates do what the Pirates do best, right? They had to make it interesting, give up a big I could already see the disgust in your face. Go ahead, Mr. Bucko. Go ahead. And then we'll get Merril Hoge on. I see you just joined us.
No, before you bash the Pirates, let's just say you said they do what the Pirates do. We won that game. Now, do we come back and win all of them? No, but let's just go on record before you bash the Bucks. The Buccos did win that game. Now, we lost yesterday. We blew it in the 10th inning, unfortunately, but that Paul Skeens debut was awesome. And the part that I know that Merrill's ready to jump on with us, and he's been through enough exciting games through his career. There was such a fever in the stadium, and maybe it's just that Pirates fans feel like everything's going to go wrong. It's like watching like a bad marriage. Like, I get it. I know all those things. But what was weird was there was just this release. Skeens takes the mound, and there's a standing ovation, and people go crazy. He starts to get ready to deliver a pitch. There is not one sound in the stadium. Like, you can hear, remember in the scene in Jerry Maguire when Rod Tidwell goes down, and it's
right.
like dead silence, and you hear one guy go, "I love you, Rod." Right. That's what it was like, man. And when he would pitch a strike, it would erupt and go crazy. If it was a ball, they'd boo the umpire, get the ball back, Skeens on the mound, and he would look in. And again, it was like the old Peyton Manning or Ben Roethlisberger, like Ben at work, like be quiet. It was the weirdest experience. And I think that Pirate fans were holding their breath that like Skeens was going to fall off the mound and break his elbow.
Well, it was an exciting debut. Finally get him up here just a year from when they drafted him, right? So that was a quick trip to the major leagues.
Yeah, less than a year. And it's in one good thing, and I know before we get to Merril and before you bash the Pirates anymore, it's very unlike the Pirates to have a 21-year-old in their rotation. Jared Jones is I believe 22. So we got some serious youth. We called it up. We're playing baseball the way it needs to be played behind the scenes. So now we just got to get those bats swinging.
Get them going. They will look to get that going in Milwaukee against the Brewers this week, and then the Cubs at Wrigley Field towards the end of the week, and that's when we should see Skeens once again. Well, enough about baseball.
Skeens would be in Wrigley.
Enough about baseball. Let's bring on our special guest for this week, Merril Hoge, former Pittsburgh Steeler, author of Find a Way Every Day. Merril, good afternoon. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Hello, gentlemen. Good to hear you. Good to hear your insight on baseball a little bit. I was actually at the game on Friday, so I got to know a little more about the Pirates and their players and GM and the staff behind them, and pulling for the Pirates to do nothing but good things,
Yeah, you saw an epic collapse on Friday, Merril. Unfortunately, you saw a great starter, and then we lost 5 in the 7th, and it was all over.
Yeah, I know the finishing part, which is so true in all the sports, you got to be able to finish, got to find ways to finish. And that takes arduous commitment from everybody to get that turned around. But, I left the Pirates though, with having not really been around them much since I played. I just think there's a lot of optimistic things there internally that, gives them hope. I just don't think Major League Baseball as a whole is set up to help all baseball teams like the NFL with the way the salary cap. Well, they don't have any salary cap, but based on how their revenue sharing or lack thereof.
There's a lot of people to blame in this, right? I mean, a lot of people hate Bob Nutting, but the case is this system's designed to let people like Nutting exist, so you can't be that upset with them.
Yeah, well, I know just enough to be dangerous, so that's probably where I should stop.
Hey, this is actually, I know Ed's got a million football questions. I just want to tell you, Merrill, this is actually our second interview. And I
Oh,
told Ed this last week. You came your rookie year. I won't date myself, nor you, Mr. Hodge, but you came to Holy Trinity Elementary School in Robinson Township, your rookie or second year at the Steelers. And I'm not going to say that I was in third grade when you showed up, but I was.
but you were fourth.
I was in third grade,
Oh my
and
God.
I won a contest. And I just want to, as a follow up, as any good journalist, I won a contest where Sister Marianne told me I had to ask you, are you friends with the players on the team? And that was
Oh,
my question for you.
well,
But
that's
when
a
I
good
stood
question.
up, I asked you, I'm sure you don't remember this. I asked you in my little tie and my suit, I said, why can't the Steelers win? Now, Mr. Hodge, let me follow up by saying Sister Marianne beat me almost to death.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? I like you. You have your own way of thinking. I like it. You're a kid, man. That's what kids do. I try to tell
Yeah, you
people.
played it off. I remember you didn't miss a beat on it.
Yeah. Well, I I don't remember that. I've had a lot of experiences, especially early in my career, of going to places that I actually had no idea what I was walking into. I could tell you story upon story of things that have happened to me that you're just like, oh my gosh.
Has it
So that
completely
actually
changed
seemed
over
like
the
it worked
years,
out
though?
all right.
And but has it completely changed over the years? The accessibility to players. I mean, when you just said, I mean, you showed up to Holy Trinity and here are the kids, and you're in and you're out, and you were very young. I think it was your first or second year. Has that changed over the years? Where I mean, we're not going to see these first round draft picks be paraded around, or is it still the same?
Well, I think it's a little different. The money, has made that different. But the thing has not changed. The organization has not changed their concept and views and value and giving back. I remember my first year, my very first meeting I had as a Pittsburgh Steeler. The first guy to address this was the chief, because the chief was still alive at that time.
Wow.
And I'm paraphrasing, but all he talked about was, listen, we are a woven fabric. If you're a Steeler, you're a woven fabric of the city. We give back to the city. We're a part of the city. Um, and that's what we do as a Steeler. He said nothing about football. And
Wow.
that struck me because I was like, even though I was 21 years old, I was smart enough to realize, okay, that's not normal. And he said nothing about football. And then Chuck Noll stood up and he said, now listen, don't just go run around doing all charity work thinking that everything and everybody's good people. He goes, tie yourself to people that are credible and make sure that you find out, what you're walking into and what you're doing before you do it. And it's actually a piece of counsel I still use to this very day. And it's so valid and true, but it explains how the Steelers are. That has not shifted from their mindset. The ability to do that, I think, has become a little more arduous and difficult, to do that. But I think as a whole, they still try to do that, get players out in the community as much as possible.
Merrill, you were a 10th. Am I getting this right? You were drafted in the 10th round from the
Yeah.
Steelers. Played here from 87 to 93. Brian and I talked a lot of draft in the last month here on the podcast. And one statistic that jumps out is I think it's like 1.6% of NCAA football athletes make it to the NFL. 1.6, just an incredible ratio. Talk a little bit about overcoming the odds, those odds, being a 10th round draft pick, coming in and being a star player for the Steelers in the late 80s and early 90s.
Well, actually, it's a 1.68 of eligible drafted players.
Okay.
Wow.
So that
Wow.
even reduced, and then only 30% of those make it. So those percentages get less and less. And from Pocatello, Idaho, I don't know what that is, but I just know it's less.
Right.
So that's
They
why
still know you there.
when you see the draft, that's why how elated those players are, excited those players are. I mean, that perspective helps you. It's very few that get drafted. And that doesn't mean they're going to make the team. Which I think you leave draft day thinking that all these players will make it, and that's just not the case. And when you walk into that environment, you realize why. You got grown men, you got the best in the world because everything has been cherry picked from every team. Teams that I played against, you'd have one blue ribbon player, a star here and a star there. So And some of those stars didn't get drafted. So it tells you the type of player that you're dealing with, and you're competing against. So I found out that got the very best out of me. I think it shows who you are eventually, as a competitor, and that's how you have to build your team. And at the time when I got here, Chuck Noll was adamant about. It's actually probably the first experience I had when you speak of the draft. There's measurable evaluators and there's football evaluators, and a measurable evaluator right off the bat because they start talking about 6'1", 225, runs a 4.3 40, rush for 2,000. Says nothing about football. For literally 2 minutes, they say nothing about football. And a football evaluator will start talking about his feet, hips, hands, leverage, all these things. And Chuck was adamant about finding football players. He understood that, not the fastest guy, the strongest guy, the guy who jumps the most makes him a football player. This game is unique. And somebody who may not be the best measurable athletic guy is a better football player. And that was the first time my eyes had been open to that way of looking at things. And that's actually what started me into evaluate. I got to evaluate our team, and I'd actually create a list of who was going to make our team and who should make our team. Because then the politics play a role. If you draft a first round draft pick, they ain't cutting him the first year.
Right.
You'd be lucky if they cut him the second year, which happened to Huey Richardson. If you remember him, he was a first round draft pick, rusher.
Tim Worley too, right? Tim Worley was another high draft pick back then.
Yeah. Tim was, and Tim he was a great teammate. Honestly, Tim Worley was a great teammate. I loved playing with him. Tim unfortunately was just so distracted with he's the first player to ever get $1 million signing bonus by the Steelers. And
Wow.
it's one of my, we kind of laugh about it now, but back then it was a shocker. But he held out all the training camp. So when he came back, we were already at Three Rivers practicing, getting ready for opening day, and we were back there stretching. And he goes, "Hey, Merril," he goes, "Hey, when do we get paid?" And I was like, "You just got $1 million." He goes, "Oh, it's already gone."
Oh, well.
Oh man.
I was like, honestly, I had a train wreck my practice. I couldn't even. I was just trying to wrap my head around it. I was like,
where is it?
I'm like, I think I got $75,000. I made $80,000 my first year.
But it has changed, right? I mean, you would think now with NIL deals and even the illegal things that went on, like as people tried to skirt the issues years ago, but pre-NIL, boy, it's got to be amazing to give a 21-year-old kid $1 million. I mean, it's almost reckless.
Well, it's unfortunate because now listen, you always got to know perspective. And what I learned, the more I learned about Tim Worley and where he came from, I understood it. Because, I always say you can't know what you don't know. And he never had any money. He never had any guidance. He never helped. But the NFL does a great job now. There's tools everywhere. Actually, if you squander stuff, if you blow stuff, that's on you because you have every resource known to mankind and elite resources. If you just choose not to use them, which players will too. Now, don't get me wrong. Players are like, I'm smarter than that. I don't need that. Because I ran the rookie symposium for nearly a decade. I would sit there and I could literally tell you who was going to make a team and be a disaster in the National Football League within those 3 days of that rookie symposium.
Well, but based on what?
Their perspective of the NFL and their perspective of really what we were doing. We were giving you services and help if you wanted it. They took it as you better do this because we had I remember the receiver out of Pitt at the time because the Steelers did not draft him. They drafted Antoine Randall. So the Cowboys drafted him. I want to say the second or third round. And I was doing a rookie panel. So these players were just in those seats a year ago. One of those players was Kendrell Bell, if you remember him, a linebacker for the Steelers, who was the hardest hitting, most ferocious linebacker I've ever seen ever coming out of college. The Richard Seymour was another guy, and then there was one other guy I can't remember. But these guys were going, "Hey, listen, we were just in your chairs the other day, and all this money they're getting. They're trying to help them how to go about managing it, cutting off people that are just nothing but going to be leeches, and they're going to bury you down, and just all these different ways to think about things and manage your money." And at the time I had said, listen, at any point when we get to a subject, if you have a question, let's address it now, because you'll hold it off and then you won't answer it, and it could be something important.
Yeah.
So the kid I'm talking about, which I can't remember his name.
Is it Antonio Bryant
Yes.
from
Because
Pitt? Yep.
his reputation, I had heard his reputation coming into it. People who had worked with him was just like, he was a complete a-hole. I mean, just absolutely just a difficult human being.
Yeah.
That's
Ego
all I
through the
knew.
roof, right?
That's
From
all I
everything
knew.
you've
That's
read.
all I knew about him. Well, he stood up. He raised his hand and he said, "You ain't telling me," pointing up to us, "how to spend my money. You ain't telling me that I can't take care of my boys. My boys been there forever. I'm taking care of my boys. You ain't. The NFL can go fly a kite. The NFL, Cowboys can go fly a kite. I'm gonna do what I want for my." So I said, "Hey, time out. No, these guys ain't telling you what to do. They're giving you the experiences that they had. You take them any way you want. Doesn't mean you have to do anything." Well, then he started going off again. Kevin Bell goes, "Hey, time out. You sit down. I'm gonna come down there and sit you down. Do you understand me?"
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. Of all the things I got prepared for, it wasn't like a fight right now. I was like, this ain't.
You weren't ready to do a
Yeah.
timeout.
I was like, oh my gosh. But I'm telling you, he was so adamant and angry. And I was just like, what? And I'm trying, I'm going back to like how we presented it. I'm like, how did we present that would anger him in a manner like that? And there was nothing. That was just another
Wow.
example of like,
Wow.
you never know how people will perceive things. You can't help that. You just try to present the best you can. But those rookie symposiums were to help those players, you know. And I go back to, it was their choice whether they used it or not, or they used the resources. And like Richard Seymour, he goes, "Well, let me just tell you this: whatever money you're making now, you better make it the rest of your life, because the second you don't make it, all your boys are going to be gone."
Wow.
And it's exactly what happened to him. I think he played a couple years in Dallas. They
Right.
got rid of him. He went to
Yep.
Tampa Bay maybe for a year. Never heard of the kid again.
You
Hey,
were
Merrill,
watching.
let me
Go
ask
ahead.
you on the flip, as far as like preparing for life in the NFL, you were under both Coach Knoll and Coach Cower. The day Cower showed up, was that like the inmates were running the asylum, in your opinion? Did it get wilder? Did it get crazy? I mean, Knoll was such a disciplinarian, right? Did you feel that it was different?
Well, how familiar are you with like World War II and General Patton?
Okay.
I only use this. Okay. Bill Cowher walked into one of the most difficult situations you could walk in ever, but one of the most perfect situations too. He had a group of men that had been trained properly. Okay, so I use World War II. Like, I'm a fan of General Patton, and his leadership and preparation, it changed the world. And without him, we don't get our air cover freed up, and we probably don't win World War II. We are doomed without General Patton and what he did. If you understand World War II, okay. Well, I could go in and probably execute some of the things General Patton did by barking orders, because he had trained everybody right. Everybody he had trained. If I just said, "Hey, listen, we're going to do A, B, and C," people are doing it. Well, Bill came into that. However, we all as players had met with him, and all of us actually were like, "Man, this is a daunting task." We felt bad for him. We felt like, I don't know how he does it. I don't know really how he comes in and really is able to capture us with Chuck Noll hanging over his head in almost everything he did. And he did a couple of things. First of all, he met with all of us individually. So that was actually the first thing that he did. It was really important. He got to know each and every one of us, and he knew each and every one of us. And then we came in and met with us. He was Bill Cowher. He wasn't anybody else. He wasn't trying to be anybody else. And then he had a plan, and he laid out that plan, and he shared what he expected from us and what we could expect from him. And he executed that. I tell people in leadership, when I speak on leadership, I'm like, you can you give the greatest presentation in the history of mankind. You walk off stage and people see you do the opposite of what you just said. And 100% of the people will do what they saw, not what they heard. So your modeling aspect is a pivotal role of leadership. And if it matches what you said, modeling matches what you said, well, then you have a powerful leader. And that's what Bill was. That, you know, he matched what he said. He did everything that he promised us. And then that in return, we wanted to do everything we could to reciprocate what he had done for us. And I don't know another guy that could have come in and done what he did under that shadow, if you will, initially. And within 2 years, you know, Bill had emerged as his own great, you know, ended up being a Hall of Fame coach. And I learned so many things from him, along with Chuck Noll, that were invaluable. Had I not played for the Steelers in that time span, I wouldn't be the person I am today based on what I learned from those guys.
Man, great stuff. Great stuff. You're watching the Three Rivers podcast. I am Ed Troop, Brian Carruthers, and in the middle is former Pittsburgh Steeler Merril Hoge, also author of Find a Way Every Day. Merril, I want to talk about your personal story in a little bit, but before we go there, I do want to talk a little bit about concussions in football, and it's something that you've been a big part of in the changes that have happened over the years. And Guardian Caps, of course, just introduced to the NFL in practices a few years ago. Just a few weeks ago, they've been approved for games. So now they could be possibly used in games to protect players. You were a big part of that, especially early on, getting some of these different scenarios in place during games, getting checked. I mean, I remember when we were younger, whatever sport you were playing, if you got hit and you could say what day of the week it was, what time it was, and where you were okay and you were put back in the game. I coach youth football. I coach my young sons in football. And now, man, the minute somebody has a little bit of a headache or something going on, we pull them out of that practice or that game. We do not mess with head injuries at all.
Good for you. That's what you should do. So really what you're talking about, and this is what's misunderstood about head trauma in any environment. People are worried about the actual incident. And I'm not saying that's not important, because we try to reduce that and minimize it the best we can. You're never going to eliminate it. It can never be eliminated. So the most important aspect of head trauma is actually care. You know, and there's a lot of things in umbrella care. You just mentioned one of them. It's identification. Okay, that might be the most important aspect of head trauma, from identifying when it initially happened, because what gets lost in translation and is confusion by partly ignorance is that people think losing consciousness is a sign of severity, and it is not. It is just a sign of head trauma. Okay, I can tell you my own experience. I never lost consciousness. And I went into cardiac arrest when I got into the locker room, but I'll get to that in a second. So what you have to take losing consciousness is it is a sign of head trauma. When and the best way to explain it, when you regain consciousness, well, now you're conscious, right? So that's not a symptom anymore. You're not worried about that. But if you didn't regain consciousness, that's all you would care about. You don't care about the other two things I'm going to talk about until you're conscious. So now that you're conscious, there's only the two signs of severity are cognitive recall and stability. So that means your overall cognitive evaluations and functions have to be evaluated properly with the proper tools. Your ability to move and not just stationary, start, stop, and all of those things need to be evaluated properly before you return to play. And there's a process in there. There should be the proper tools in place for that. So there's really several steps. It's identifying first and foremost. That's the most important aspect of head trauma. To your point, if you saw somebody, they'll say they have a headache after they got a hit, you are part of the WISE protocol. You remove them. I actually established the first actual youth football protocol in 2003 in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, where I was coaching. That actually translated. I'm sure you've heard of heads up football,
right?
Of course.
Or actually, Mayor, I was just going to say, in our youth organization, and I'm also on the board as well for our youth organization, it's a requirement for all head coaches to take the USA Football Heads Up training that's out there. Right. It's a requirement that we make them do they have to get certified in order to be a coach.
Okay, so Heads Up Football, do you know where that came from?
I'm guessing maybe you.
I gave them all of the principles, and they were all Chuck Noll's principles. Okay, I was on a special board. I used to sit on USA Football's board. And then they did a subcommittee, and here was our direction. I was on the NFL committee at the time, helping them clean up the NFL and give youth football direction. And so our real guidelines were, let's make the game better and safer. Well, Chuck Noll used to always talk, you're a better player and a safer player if you do these three things: same foot, same shoulder, rising blow, first contact wins. Now, if I walk through every one of those 3 principles, you put it to every position, and even quarterback, every position. If you fundamentally put a player in the right position and teach them the right way to play it, they're a better, safer player. That's why, like, when I administer, or what I used to, when we used to hand out gear, I used to put shoulder pads on my kids. I go, okay, these are used. These are our weapons. Okay, we play behind these. We use these. When I put a helmet on, I go, okay, that's to protect you. It is not to be used as a weapon. And so we started in 2003 initiating, what things are put on us for and why are they used in that manner. And then we walk through that process of teaching, a good tackler, same foot, same shoulder, rising blow, first contact wins. You walk through all those processes of the proper way to tackle, proper way to block, proper way to run the ball and protect yourself,
Right.
proper way to throw the football. I mean, everything, proper way to run a route, you name it, everything is there. So I was at this committee and they're like, better, safer. And I was like, I looked up at my student playbook. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've heard that for years. I take them out and that becomes heads up football. That's what heads up football is. Merril Hoge, Arrington.
Of course.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so I'd covered LeVar. I've known LeVar for a long time, and LeVar and I were talking because he was even retired at this time, or he just retired, or he was the end of his career. It was around 2003, or it was before 2003. And I was talking to him about it and how we were building the protocol. And he said, man, I hate putting my head in front of a ball carrier. And I was like, I don't care if he's 185. I'm like, really? He goes, oh man. He goes, even 185, man, that could take the way it wrenches my neck. And actually, the only thing that we changed in the protocol and how to tackle was angle blocks. We never want a kid to get his head and neck in front of the ball carrier, which is usually taught. And actually, even when we shared that, things get lost in translation because I went back to after we had established this stuff and looked at different programs to make sure they were applying this proper things. They were still teaching that. And when you think about it, if you put the helmet on the backside of the player, you're forced to tackle better. You have to bring your arms. And one of the arts of tackling that are missed are wrapping up and finishing. Everybody wants to hit people. And if you tackle properly, that forces you to tackle, especially on an angle block, and not put your neck and head in harm's way. And so that's the only thing that we changed. And it was because of LeVar Arrington, quite honestly, that we added that little wrinkle to make it a better, safer game for youth football. So we did all of that. Jim Moore Jr. was on the committee, and the coach that just got fired from Northwestern. I always forget his name.
Ed.
I had Merril on the
encyclopedia. Merril.
I had him on the Antonio Bryant, but not this one.
Yeah, this but he just got fired a couple years ago because of some hazing thing. He'd been in Northwestern.
I know you're talking about. Yep.
Erickson or something like that, it's such an easy name. I forget it all the time, but he was on the committee, and they were really not. They were one of them was running spring ball. Jim Moore Jr. was an NFL coach. They don't have real time to. And it's why we're better, safer. I took that thing, and that became heads up football, just with those additions, and that they built it from that. But that was the foundational piece from where you get heads up football and the direction we were trying to give to youth football. So you're doing the proper thing. It goes back to care. It's about identifying head trauma, having everybody aware of that, the removal, and not allowing them to play until they're properly recovered and they do the proper rehab cognitively and physically to get them ready to return to play. Once you do that, then you've got a safer environment. Okay. That you do those things, that's going to outdo a cap. That's not going to do the helmet. Listen, the helmet today is 100% better than it was a decade ago. The helmet used to be designed to withstand impact. It now absorbs impact. Just that difference right there makes the helmet so much better than it was just 10 years ago. So we can keep doing all these things. I just don't want people to get lost in thinking, well, you have these caps on, you're never going to have head trauma. Oh, not true. That's actually not true. And actually, if you have parents listening to this and they're like, well, I'm not going to let my kid play sport because I don't want him to get head trauma. Well, let me throw this at you. The leading cause of head trauma in the entire country is tripping and falling. The most dangerous environment where that's probably going to happen is your home. And the most dangerous activity your kids can do before they put keys in a car are wheeled activities without a helmet on. Rollerblades, skateboards, and bicycles. Actually, sports has protocols and things in play to make it a better, safer, and equipment for your kids. You want your kids in athletics today. They want them playing sports. You want them to be as active as possible for not just where it is today, but the resiliency, the accountability, the ownership, and the relationships and the life skills that are developed through sports, especially at a young age, is a vital component to growth and evolving as a young kid.
You think on the same level, Merrill, that as it gets bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, Jack Lambert, while was a monster, he wasn't the monster that LeVar Arrington is. They weren't the monster that the guys today are. Will this game become too big, too strong, too fast to even play heads-up football?
Well, no. See, now here's what's relative. Okay,
Yeah.
you think of how people train to get ready for football now. They didn't do that. They're working 9 to 5 jobs, then they walked out to play the game. The
True.
rehab process and the care that goes into taking care of the body is extraordinary now. Like those components alone, nutrition and all the things and access, the thing that people have, just balance all of that out.
Yeah.
And I don't, and the way the equipment is designed today, the absorption of stuff, the rules that are applied, you're demanding people play the game correctly. That's what's been lost. And like, just put flags on players. Okay, well, to this, I'll give you the football and I'll put you inside those white lines, and we'll let you think. We'll let you say. I'll ask you then, is it flag football? Because the objective is to hit the other player as hard as you possibly can. Just do it right.
Well, Merrill, let me ask. So you don't have to Google Merril Hoge and CTE to get 5 million articles. This is the people's concern, or what the experts who you've done interviews with, who you haven't done it with, they go back to saying that you said at some point that CTE isn't caused by football. That's still true, right? From what you're saying is this game causes problems if it is done wrong. That's where people are held up, that they think your elevator pitch is that you're anti-CTE.
Okay, I wrote this book. Okay, this book right here has all of the scientific evidence. Okay, the clowns and people who created this narrative, and I'll use that term with endearment. Okay,
Of course.
Boston University, they're scumbag liars. Okay, their science is a bunch of garbage and a bunch of lies. Now, when I did this book originally, there were 2 things that we knew. One, first of all, none of their science said what they claimed it said, but nobody went and read the scientific literature. Okay, they just said, you know what? We heard them say that their science says. First of all, let me back up. They first said concussions cause CTE, and then their science got exposed that they were lying. So what they do? They created up some concussion. They're like, oh, it's not a concussion, it's these repetitive blows. Okay, if anybody ever tells you, well, it's a subconcussive hit, you ask them this: A, what's the definition, and what is the threshold you measure that with? Neither one of them exists. Neither one. In fact, the only piece of scientific literature to support that is when it talks about it is misleading, poorly defined, and therefore science fiction. Without a threshold and without a way to document what you are saying, you are making it up. They've made up everything that they have done. Now, this is the worst part. This is the most devastating part. And at the time, I couldn't put it in the book. We're actually rewriting the book, and we're going to put it back in the book because finally now it's not in the court of public opinion. See, what happened to these rats is they kept telling people, oh, well, the reason you got a problem because you played football. The reason you committed suicide because you played football and you had CTE. Okay, first of all, scientifically, CTE is an observation state. It is not a disease. And that is a scientific fact. If anybody says otherwise, then just tell them, show me the scientific literature. Well, I'll shut up right now if they just show you the scientific literature. It does not exist. 2 things have happened since I wrote that book. One, they got exposed for the rats they are, and all of their medical records have been changed. They got caught, and that is in court documents in Chicago, in LA, the court cases that they've been exposed in. Their medical and science, their medical doctors and scientists changed medical records
to fit their narrative of CTE. Okay, if you did this in cancer research, they'd be in prison. Just to do that is about the most unethical thing you can do as a doctor. You signed a Hippocratic oath to do no harm.
Well,
And
why
that's
did they do
exactly
it then?
what's
What was
filed.
what was behind it then? Why would a doctor put it all on the line to lie about football and lie about CTE?
Two things. And the two things that erode society and they erode people: money and ego. Now I'll go this one more. Okay. Now this scientific literature keeps working, and they keep. This is masses of amounts of literature to support what I am telling you. There is no scientific evidence to support that contact sports cause this pattern. Because in the medical journal, of all the people who have it, okay, 2/3 of them never even played a sport in their life. There's kids as young as 6 years old and 3 years old that have the same pattern that they say athletes have. And then probably the most disturbing is they just did a scientific literature of the last 10 years. They took every piece of scientific literature. First of all, they created a criteria. And the criteria is important because, see, science doesn't lie. People lie about their science. If you do science right, it tells you the truth. It tells you where to go. But here's what Boston University did. They created a narrative, and then they're going to make their science match it. You can't do science that way. That's corruption right there. That's evil corruption right there. So here's what they did. This is a group, some of the most well-respected people in the world. Anne McKee, who's one of the so-called experts at Boston University, who, by the way, quit her internship and never got qualified as an expert. Her husband was a head of the program and anointed her credentials, so she didn't even qualify for them. And that happened in court documents as well, that are in court cases in Cook County and Los Angeles. So they gave her basically keys to something she knew nothing about. They even had her a part of this group of doctors that were going to look at every piece of literature that had done to this point. When they got done with the criteria, not one piece of scientific literature that Boston University has put out or the Concussion Legacy has put out qualified. They couldn't put any of it in because it was such garbage. So Anne McKee, just like a 10-year-old child, she leaves the panel because they're not going to use her research.
No.
Now, what the research said after they got done with all of it, okay, not just a few here and there was no scientific literature to support that you should be that any like politician or politics should be intervening in contact sports. That there was no evidence that's going to cause brain diseases or health issues later in life. None in all of the research. And now people don't see that because the media is not going to tell you that. You think for the second, journalism is at its all-time worst right now. There is no journalism. Journalism is disgusting from every aspect that you can imagine. Because let's just say you're a journalist. Your responsibility is you need to go read all the scientific literature before you talk about the scientific literature. That's your responsibility.
And you won't do it, right? You won't do it.
You know what? When I launched this book, the USA Today, I'm trying to think of her name. I wish her name had come because she was absolutely foul when it comes to the journalist. This is what she said to me. She didn't need to read my book. I said, wait, you're going to do it. You're going to do an article on my book, and you're not going to read my book.
Yeah,
that's disgusting. That's as disgusting of journalism excuse I've ever heard in my life. But it speaks to who you are. USA
Well, let me ask
Today,
you, Merril. So I guess we don't have enough info, and the next book is coming out, so I think that's now a must read to see where we've gone. There's always going to be parents who say, "I'm not letting my kids play baseball, football, all these sports." Right? So take those people out of it. What about the people who are on the fence who do see things that happen in high school sports or youth sports or professional sports, or you see people getting carted off the field, and Tua for the Dolphins, everyone now knows that that's a talking point, right? That the fingers clench up. What's your elevator pitch to a parent that's like me? I have an eighth grader who doesn't play football but might want to. What's the elevator pitch for the people who are still reasonably considering it?
Well, Brian, I'm not going to change anybody's mind. That's not my goal. My goal is to open up your mind and ask you to look at all of the evidence and all the facts. So you say that people are on the fence. I go back to, and you're right. There's going to be people that, regardless of the truth, they're going to ignore, and their kids are not going to get to play it. Well, the first thing that I'm a parent too. Okay, I've coached 8 to 18. I've coached thousands of kids from 8 to 18. Okay, I've coached from 8 to 38. but a majority of my coaching for like 20 years was 8 to 18. I have dealt with thousands of kids in contact sports, not just football, basketball, and baseball. When I look at this, I look at as a parent, okay, if your kid loves something, don't rob them of that opportunity unless you've looked at every aspect of this and understand the facts before you rob them of an opportunity that's going to help them grow in life. Not be a professional athlete. I'm not interested in that.
That's right.
That was never the goal. And at worst case, I mean, if you want to talk about trying to get an education out of it and take it as far as you can, that's a good thing too. But let's not talk about the pros. Look at all of the things that could be most dangerous for your kids. Number one, no activities and sugar consumption.
Sure.
Right there, that's going to kill more people in this country right there than any other thing that we could possibly talk about. If you think about head trauma, I already mentioned, they're a greater risk at your home trying to step in a shower, walk down the stairs, play on a trampoline, be in the backyard. Next level, most dangerous, if they're going to ride a bike, wheels, skateboard, or rollerblade without a helmet on. So just in those activities, there's a greater risk of head trauma there. And what protocol do you have in place? How have you been educated if it does happen to your kids? You need to be educated as a parent that if it happens, here's what my steps are. This is what I do, and this is how I'm going to execute. Then you don't live in fear.
Well, then also, Merril, don't you think you throw in there too that it's an easy for people, an easy baby, and ed coaches, and so do you. It's an easy babysitter 2 hours. So go play football locally. Who's coaching? I don't know. The mailman. Did you do the thing? I don't know. Parents have to take some control to figure out who's teaching their kids the right things that they're doing.
That is another, Brian, it's an excellent point because listen, don't just throw your kids in a program and assume they're going to do it right. Go investigate. And I'd be the first one to tell you, if you've got a football program, you go in, because like in the book, we do this to help people with asking questions. First of all, ask them, what is your protocol for head trauma? And if they go, well, pull them out.
Gone.
If they don't have a plan, pull them out. Then you ask them, go, listen, in youth football, this can, Ed, you know this. Yep. You got dynamics that are like, I got a kid, like my son, who he could play football from the day he was born, and he was meant to play football. And then I got kids that really want to play football. They're half the size of him. They don't even know how to play it. They're timid. Okay, well, I don't want to put them up against Bo.
No.
That's the dumbest thing to do. You got to match them up with things. You got to teach them how to play the game. You got to build confidence in them. It's a whole different way of developing and practicing with kids like that. It is about, okay, helping them grow and evolve and get better and have fun. Okay, that is your goal. It is not to win it. I mean,
well, Merril, I was just going to say, don't you want to know immediately when you take your 9-year-old, or in my case, my 12-year-old, to practice that winning is not the first thing that's coming out of this coach's mouth? I think that's the war on football, is psychos who coach sports at winning at any level.
That's any sport.
Not going to deny that. It is in every sport. It's not just football.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
I coached basketball. I coached baseball. I saw it in every one of them. It's about, that's why it's important as a parent. What environment are you sticking them in? Where are you going to put them? How what are they going to learn from that environment? You get good coaching. You get a good environment. Kids will leave with experiences that are life lasting, that are tool belts for your life's work. And that's how you should think of it as a coach. I do coaching clinics a lot. And I always ask the coach, everybody that's in the environment has usually played youth football. And, I always get, I played youth football. I go, let me ask you this, you're all coaches now. Yeah, they're coaching now. I go, did any of you guys ever call your own plays? Well, let me back up. I asked them, when you were playing, did you get to call your own plays? No. I go, would you have liked to? Every one of them raised their hand. I go, okay, now you're coaching. How many of you let your players call their plays? No, nobody raised their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. You know better than anybody how awesome that would be. Now, first of all, it's not just let them call plays. It's if they got to call plays, they have to understand the game. They have to learn the game. They got to be responsible for the game. They get more out of that when they're in charge of the game.
Absolutely.
By the time my son started playing at 7, and then I coached him all the way to 14. By the time we get to age 14, I started doing this at age 7. By the time they were 14, they were calling all their plays, offensively and defensively. They ran all of how we got warmed up, how we got ready. I was just there really observing, making sure that we're or being there for when decisions had to be made, leading them, but they were in charge.
Well, I
David
hope
takes
Ed
it.
has learned something from this, Merrill, because a lot of people scream "Fire Troop" during the games, like Steeler fans chant "Fire Canada."
No, come on. Merrill and I are on the same path. This is actually very relieving for me to hear him speak about all this. And Merrill, I'll have to touch base with you offline, man. I'd love to have you in to talk to some of our coaches at some point, even as video, like we're doing right now. Just really awesome, good stuff coming from you. I am sensitive of your time, and we are well over where we should be, but I do want to end and have you talk briefly about your current book that's out there. And you see it on your shirt, you see it up here on our graphic, Find a Way. And Merril, I've followed you on social media the last couple of years. Your story's awesome. Your message is awesome. I want you to talk a little bit about Find a Way. We know you battled cancer back in 2003. You've overcome that. You've overcome a lot of different odds. I myself, Brian knows this. I've lost over 100 pounds in the last year and a half. And I got to tell you, man, and I'm not saying it's just because you're on our show, but a big reason why we wanted to have you on the show is you're an inspiration to me. And a lot of your messages that you post on social media each and every day, each and every week is it motivates a lot of us, including myself, man. It's really good stuff.
Well, Ed, first of all, I appreciate that. I'm going to start out with this. I'm a product of a lot of people. Like, people have challenged me, people have inspired me. I find hope in people. And that's probably because of the impact of what's happened to me in my life. I'm so adamant about being able to, like, everything I learned, throw it out there, and it might help somebody. Doesn't mean it's going to help everybody. And the way you perceive it and take it is going to be different than somebody else. But I go back to the words "find a way." They helped me live a dream and fight to live, and a lot of in between. But they were just supposed to help me live a dream as a kid. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, well, first of all, even before that, my career ended. I mean, my career abruptly ended. I went into cardiac arrest. I was in intensive care for 2 days. I had to learn how to read again. I was as dark as I had ever been until I get diagnosed with cancer, as far as having no hope. My career was over. I had no purpose, and I had to rebuild my life at age 30. Um, I laid on a couch for months, and I did what I call a toxic blender of disaster. I pointed fingers, I casted blame, and I made excuses every day. I just lost my dream. Okay, and I didn't need to do that. I could get into a whole host of excuses that I came up with, and bitter and all the things. And it wasn't until I realized that, and actually the words "find a way" helped me, because I'm laying on the couch and I got no hope. But I realized I had one spark of hope left in me, and you know what that was?
Hmm.
I was responsible. I needed to take ownership of where I was and where I was going to go. And nobody was going to come get me off that couch. Nobody is going to help you on the journey. Nobody's going to carry you on the journey. Nobody is
Right.
going to do all the work for you. It starts with you. Now, I'm not saying people don't help you along the way. Don't get me wrong. You have to start the journey. You take ownership, and that means you break a chain and you end a cycle if you're in a bad spot. Okay. And then you create another plan and you move forward with that. And I'm not saying people can't help you on the way, but the day I got off that couch and I made that initial move and I said, I'm done with that toxic blender of disaster. I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm not casting blame, and I'm not making excuses going forward, because people who make excuses make their day easier, but their tomorrow harder. And they live in that forever. And if you never get out of it, that is where you'll stay. Well, the day I did that, I actually made one call. A guy who had left me a message about 2 times, and he left me about 3 weeks prior to this happening. And it was actually Lynn Swan. And Lynn Swan knew that I was getting into broadcasting, and and I was in Chicago at the time. He was doing a Michigan game in Illinois, and he wanted me to come up and observe him, shout him for a couple of days if I was interested. And I made that call back, and I went on that trip. Okay, so now that Lynn Swan helped me on my journey of getting out, but Lynn Swan wasn't going to come get me off the couch. Lynn Swan helped me make that next step. And no matter where you are in your life, moments where you look in the mirror and you check on yourself and you evaluate yourself. Are you where you want to be? Are you as happy as you can be? Are you getting everything out of your God-given abilities? Is there more you want to do? Is there something you want to stop, or is there something you want to start? Because there's something we all want to start and something we all want to stop. You get to make a commitment to that person in the mirror, and then it's you take that ownership, and you're like, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to go to bed. We get up the next morning, the second our feet hit the ground, man, we take action. And I'm not saying that's easy, okay? But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And then you're in charge of your life. And that ownership right there, and you putting yourself in charge, man, things change. Life changes. I always say that when I speak, do you control your mind or does your mind control you? This is an actual fact, physically, scientifically. When we control our mind, when we work on that and we have tools and visuals and words can help those things. That's why I'm a big vision guy and a self-reflection guy, is that when you control your mind, there is nothing a human being cannot overcome, and there's nothing a human being can't become. It is about controlling your mind and exercising patterns every day that you have a relentless commitment to. And you're in charge of that. Nobody else can take that from you. And if you sit in that toxic blender I mentioned, that's where you're going to be. You can't do this other part. You got to get out of that and come over here. And when you do that, that is when life changes for people. And that
Yeah,
is when
hell
things
yeah.
evolve and greatness happens.
Hell
Great,
yeah.
great stuff. And, I always think about Bill Parcells, Merril, who always said, look in the mirror. Are you happy with the man in the mirror that's looking back to you?
It's true. And any way you can get these messages, you got to take them any way you see fit and apply them to your life. Okay. I'll just tell you one thing I heard from my favorite player that changed me as a kid. It became a staple, a life principle. Walter Payton was asked in an interview process, a tape called Winning in Life. And I got the tape because I wanted to know how he trained. He said he was going to talk about how he trained. I was like, well, I was a kid. I was like, man, whatever he's doing, I'm doing. I was already doing what he was doing, okay, or thought I was. And the interviewer asked him, well, what makes you better than everybody else? He's the all-time leading rusher in the National Football League at this time. And before I share what he said, if you remember, which I don't expect people to remember him or know everything about him. This was said about him all the time. It was so confusing as a kid. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest. He's not the fastest. He's just the best. And I'm like, man, everybody bigger, stronger, and faster. He's better than me. How's this guy the best in the world?
Right.
How is that? And he said something as profound as I've ever heard a human being say it. And it changed me from a principle perspective in my life. He paused for a second and he said, I want it more than they do. Every day of the week. In the off season, when I go run that dirt hill at 7:00 in the morning, you better believe I want it more than they do. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. During the season, and there's not 65,000 fans sitting in the stands, cameras are not rolling everywhere. I want it more than they do. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Then Sunday at 1:00 when you get to see me, you better believe I want it more than they do.
Man, I'm ready.
Hell yeah.
Where's my helmet?
I ate a bowl of ice cream for breakfast. I'm sorry,
Let's
man.
go.
I'm starting over tomorrow.
I'm ready, Merril.
I hit pause on that thing, and I'm like, I can do that. That is a relentless commitment of every single day.
So good, man. There's not
a human. I don't care what your circumstances are. That relentless commitment every day is a choice that you can apply. Okay. Now, if you choose not to, okay, that's on you. Okay. Don't sit there and say that somebody else caused that. You decide that. And if you ever exercise that into something in your life and you find out how powerful it becomes, man, it becomes your tool belt in life. You're like, I can apply that to anything, and I'm going to do it to everything. And I'm so grateful so indirectly, I learned so much from him. But then when I got to Chicago, I learned so much about him because I got to know him better. And that's why I go back to product so many people and all these things that I have learned that I'm like, God, that was instrumental. Had I not learned that or known that guy, I would never known that because I ain't smart enough to know this stuff. But to share it and say, people go, yeah, I'll take that. No, it's not for me. It's okay. That's okay. But if there's something that you throw out that could help people, that's what it's about.
Merril, I wish we could spend more time with you, man. We're going to have you back on again because I had a whole list of questions about the current Steelers that we didn't even touch, man. I just love talking about your career and your mindset with all these different topics. Really good stuff. Thank you, sir, for coming on, and we'd love to have you again.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me, and keep on coaching those kids, all right?
Will do, brother. Will do. That's going to
do it for you guys. See you, Brian. See you, Ed.
That's good.
Thanks,
Merril.
There he is, the great Merril Hoge. Oh, he's still on. I was going to show him. Oh, wait.
I might stay on. I never know how to do this.
Find a way.
I can take him off.
You need to want it better than I. Oh, there you go.
There, Merril. We took you off. There you go.
He's awesome, man. And I didn't
realize I'm exhausted.
I didn't realize how in demand Hoge is as a speaker, man. You see it, right? I mean, it's awesome. So it was great to talk to him. And I mean, look, his take on CTE, it gets jumbled. I think a lot of people's gets jumbled as you get into this constant battle. To hear from him that there is a reasonable approach to everything, I think you have to do what he said. You have to actually sit down and listen to people and hear what they have to say about it.
Right. Absolutely. And you can definitely take a look at his book, Brainwashed, as well as his current book, Find a Way. Really good stuff,
When he
man.
called that
But
doctor a piece of scum or a rat, like, I'm not really sure what to say on that. So, I mean, I feel like that was a fight he brought me into that I didn't have a side. That person may be scum and may be a rat. I'm not sure. Obviously, Merril believes it. So, you got to do your own research on it.
But like I said, man, we got to get him back on. I had a whole list of questions about the current Steelers, and that's the bread and butter of what Merril does, analyzing and telling you his opinion. And we didn't even touch anything on current Steelers. So we'll have to have him back on again.
Yeah, it was great to have him. And thanks
Great
for everyone
message.
who took it out today.
Great message. Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for our broadcast for this week for the Three Rivers podcast.
Hey, by the way, I know we do the long goodbye on the Three Rivers podcast. How many more times could we have invited Merril to come and help coach with you? He wasn't taking it. Merril, don't promise the kids that Merril Hoge is coming. We threw it out there like 6 times. I tried my best for you, homie. He's not coming.
I'm sending him another email right after this, and I'm inviting him again to our summer camps. I want him there. I will find a way. I will find a way.
You better want it more than.
How about you? I mean, I'm ready to go run that dirt hill at 7:00 in the morning. Let's go, baby.
Let's do it.
For Brian Carruthers, Ed Troop signing off for now, the Three Rivers podcast for Monday, May 13th. Merril Hoge, we want to thank him and all his great folks around him, Angela and everyone else that helped get Merril on for our podcast. We will be back next week with Craig Wolfley, another former Steeler and current Steeler analyst on the Steelers radio network as well. Craig,
are you going to ask him to try to come to one of your practices?
Of course, 100%. Absolutely. I will not stop until I succeed.
You know what we need to start doing is these shows in person so we can get people to autograph a bunch of stuff so we can sell it online.
Now that's the play of the day right there, my friend. That's the play of the day.
There
we'll see you next week right here on the Three Rivers podcast, everybody. Have a great day.